Well, hello.
Hello. The beeping is like right outside your office. It's
Oh, I
hilarious.
know. It's because it's the forklift, like right
The
downstairs.
forklift. Yeah.
I'm
It's
so
like right
sorry,
there.
everybody.
No, it's like not loud at all, but I'm sure nobody else can hear it, but I just know because I know what it is. And I'm like, whoa, factory.
Yeah.
I
Welcome to
digress.
welcome to the couple days before Thanksgiving where you try to get everything out the door today because no one is
Out
driving
the
tomorrow.
door. Because you can't get answers tomorrow or Thursday or Friday.
Nope, everybody, like pretty much as of 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning, nothing happens in the United States of America in terms of manufacturing or shipping anything.
Yeah. Good luck. Good luck. I know.
Oh.
Bless.
So it's been a little bit since we've been on the YouTubes.
I know. I
We
know.
want to
With the
apologize for
live.
last week. We were in New Orleans and there was some time change kerfuffles, and the event we were speaking at had to change our time on their schedule as well. And it just all became a little bit too much. So we want to thank you for your patience, but we are back today, and you haven't missed anything. We're still going to cover everything we were going to cover.
Yeah, I only took out a couple things where I was like, yeah, and because we added stuff, obviously, because more news has happened.
Things keep
So
happening.
things keep happening, big things keep happening. So we shuffled things around just a little bit, but we've got a lot of stuff to get to.
Well, then
I'm
we might as
excited.
well actually get to it, shouldn't we?
Let's do it. Awesome. I'm excited. Today, y'all, we're debuting not only, obviously, we're on the cancel culture watch now, but I had so much fun making new segment intros videos for our newly titled segments. So not only do we have snarky ass titles for our segments, but now we have snarky ass videos to go with our segments. So up first is our updates that we have on stories for you, which we are right now calling Not New News.
There we go.
Thank you.
So the first one is, excuse me, I'm on the wrong window. The first one has to do with Harvard University, and I believe this is yours, ma'am.
It is mine. Yeah. So this is kind of an update on a story I did a few weeks ago on the Cancel Culture Watch about a local museum, I believe in Massachusetts, I don't even remember, returning stolen items that belonged to Native American tribes from across the whole country. So this one is about the Peabody Museum at Harvard, which is going to return hundreds of Native American hair samples. And I really struggled like which segment to put this under because sometimes I was like, accountability corner, this is why we can't have nice things, like where, and then I was like, you know what, we'll put it in updates because it's a conversation we've been having for a while. Yeah, so they took a lot of hair samples, which is just, that's the terrible part of it. It's unsurprising for anyone who's studied museum practices or the way that we have objectified and commodified Native American bodies. But hair is particularly significant in a lot of Indigenous communities and cultures. It's an important part of identity and culture and belonging. And a lot of Native American hair was cut when students and children were, abducted and forced into government-run boarding schools. And so
Just
then they
that
gave
little
the hair,
activity.
that little activity. So then they gave the hair to the Harvard Museum. Yeah. So I mean, it's a good it's a good and it's both and in this one. And I was just scrolling through to find Victor Lopez Carmen is a third-year medical student at Harvard who is a member of the Crow Creek Sioux tribe, said that he was devastated to learn of the hair collection. And I feel like that's pretty accurate. He said, I still feel a sense of disgust that Harvard has had these hair clippings for decades and we're just finding out about it now. Also,
Yeah.
that they even accepted it in the first place.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I don't understand. Like, the longer we do this kind of work, the less I understand museums. And like the less I understand,
like what are you?
what are we trying to do? Because there's great museums. Like, I love the Museum of the American Revolution, and it's really inclusive and it's done a lot of work to get there. But I guess I don't. So like, I guess I understand museums with a purpose. But like these kind of just general like Museum of Natural History stuff, like that's a really broad remit. Like what story are we trying to tell here? So
Yeah.
because this kind of stuff keeps happening.
It happened for a long time. Yeah. And I mean, like, it's not just what happened to Native Americans in
No,
what
Greek.
is
The Greeks
now
need their Elgin marbles back. Thank you very much.
High British Museum.
Yeah.
It is museum collections are a product of colonization and imperialism and enslavement and genocide and
God, we
all
started
of
with a
those
really
things.
happy one this week.
You
Sorry,
guys
everybody.
know. You guys know what we're here for. We've got some good vibes on this one. We've got some funny stories, I think. I'm like looking at that. I'm like, do
We
we?
don't have
No, we
that
do.
many. This is
We
and
do.
I think this is a good one to kick off with, because we'll just remind everybody that, if you're not joining us from the States, this is the week that Americans celebrate the mythologized holiday of Thanksgiving.
It is a good one.
And so it's good to remember that we are all anywhere in North America living on stolen land. So it's important to keep that in mind.
It is indeed.
So this has been an evolving story. And I know, like, this isn't the latest happening. I will even say, I think the latest actually is the very brave representation of the Iranian football team yesterday at the World Cup for refusing to sing the national anthem.
Yeah.
And protesting in other ways after.
And calling out
Yeah.
Iran and like standing with the protesters in the press conference afterwards.
Yep.
Like,
That was wild
ballsy.
and amazing, because FIFA has banned. So the deal is with this World Cup, and we're going to get to the World Cup in a couple slides, is that FIFA has banned any protest and has told every team that if they do any level of protest, their captain will get an automatic yellow card, which I have a real issue with, because like that's not your fine.
It's
Just find the money. Like, find the money. Like, you can't affect their play. But they are, because they're FIFA and they're disgusting. And so England was going to wear queer affirming armbands. And Captain Harry Kane made the decision to take them off and protest in other ways. Like, they're wearing them around town. They're saying they're wearing them during press conferences because they don't want to dishonor all of the work that got them there. And take that risk. And, Harry Kane seems to be a decent human being. So I have a feeling he really weighed that, and the whole England team did. But the Iranian football team essentially said, hold my beer. So that is the latest, I think, really on this story.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I just put this in the updates because we want to keep talking about it and make sure that other people keep talking about it. Because the protests are ongoing. There was an entire, I believe, women's basketball team who all took off their mandatory hijabs to play a game.
Okay.
Like, this is a thing that is happening in the world and has major ramifications for Iranian humans, but also humans in general. So, yeah, I don't want to really get into the weeds with this update. The Tehran court is starting to sentence prisoners to death. There's been some 300 prisoners that probably protesters that have already been killed just in police action. So it's really hard to get accurate numbers out of this regime. But it is something that we just want, every time we have an update, we're going to keep updating you because we have a global perspective on our show. That's why the whole planet is behind us in our newsroom.
Yeah, indeed. What a beautiful headline.
This was a very excited voice memo into Slack from Dr. Kristen to myself and our Eleanor. And yeah, I mean, I don't think we really need to go into very much detail over this, except just to say it out loud that Elizabeth Holmes, the
convicted and disgraced,
horrible person who was the founder of Theranos, it got 11 years and 3 months in jail for defrauding investors of her. I love this sentence, Axios. Judge to 11 years and 3 months in prison for defrauding investors in her failed blood testing company, Theranos.
And like, it's funny because I love this. I'll say this. I love this headline because I love the fact that she's going to have consequences for these actions. But I also have this, like, I don't think that prison is what we should do for white collar crime kind of thing. Like, prisons are overcrowded and we have a lot of other problems. And also everything she was convicted of doesn't bother me. Like, she defrauded investors. Like, okay. But she put people's lives at risk. Yeah. And like Ian took his own life because of her. So I don't think that we need 11 years because she defrauded investors, but I'm really glad she got 11 years because of the people she put at risk. So it's I'm not celebrating. I don't think she should have been 11 years for, like, I'm so sorry you were defrauded. Okay.
I'm sorry you were stupid enough to believe her because she was a pretty white young lady.
But because they didn't have the evidence to get her on the incredible amount of people that she put in risk in the Pfizer trial and at the Walgreens stuff, I'm glad that she's going to pay a consequence. And I'm also really glad that they didn't go super light on her because, gosh, did all of her appeals motions and all of her sentencing motions really lean on the fact that she was a mother.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw a really great tweet about it after she was convicted. It was like, people pleading and saying she shouldn't be going to prison because she's a mother. And somebody was like, Jess, who do you think populates women's prisons? Yeah. We're the only sex that can carry babies. And what do you think? Who women are in women's prisons? Mm-hmm. Like, female people are in women's. It was just like, okay, do we care about any of those mothers? No. Gotcha. All right, so that concludes Not New News. That is not new news. And now we are on to Boardroom Baddies. When you making me feel this way, like I'm the one to blame. Nah, bringing it all up. Are we the baddies is the question we are asking. And currently of, I don't know, Qatar, FIFA, pick a feature. We could spend an entire, I think, cancel culture watch on the World Cup, and we might after it's over, but right now it's just started. But yeah, I put this one in there. We had another story about the World Cup, but it was outdated because it was from 2 weeks ago. I think this one is just a good reminder to have. We've had several conversations offline. I don't know online yet about how to grapple with loving the sport of football.
We talked about it in our newsletter, but we haven't, I don't believe, talked about it in Cancel Culture Watch.
Okay. So, I mean, I'll say my piece, and then I'd love for you to share what you are doing as the avid football watcher. It's very easy for me to not watch the World Cup. And, not miss out on the culture and the sporting event of it and all of that. But in case you were unaware, the World Cup is being held in Qatar. There have been massive human rights violations in the lead up to this World Cup. including, I think 6,500 is a low estimate. I've seen estimates as high as 12,000 migrant workers who died in the building of the facilities for the World Cup. So we just wanted to have a minute to recognize those humans and say that their lives had value, and that all of the things that the Qatari government stands against are human persons who have value as well.
Yeah. How am I handling it? So, FYI, even before Qatar started building buildings, this was corrupt.
This is not new news that FIFA is corrupt.
No, but the Qatar bid in particular was really bad. So it was kind of known among all the voting nations that the 2022 World Cup was going to the US. Like, walking into that ceremony, everybody who had voted for the US. Qatar paid a whole lot of money to bribe then French president, still president Macron. Is he still president?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, it's Italy that got the new right-wing lady. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we bribed Emmanuel Macron to change France's vote on the FIFA committee, and that is how Qatar won the very surprising vote. There's a lot of rumors as to what that bribe was. I've seen several things reported, but obviously it was cash, and it was supposedly for infrastructure in Paris. But the minute this got announced, everyone knew something was fishy. This isn't like Russia, where you could at least argue that they have a football program. Qatar doesn't have one. They don't have a club team. They don't have leagues. They don't have anything. And so, like, Russia was already uncomfortable, but China is uncomfortable, but they have football. And so this is all, even before we started hearing about migrant workers, football fans and devoted World Cup watchers have had to grapple with what the hell we were going to do. Also, we can get into the conversation of it's really screwing up the Premiership season and the Bundesliga season and La Liga, and all, like, this is not when you play international football.
No, it happens over the summer, usually, but it's too hot in Qatar to play football. It's not too hot in Qatar to build stadiums, which is when a lot of this took place.
So there's also a whole lot. I mean, this is the major issue, is that probably around 10,000 people lost their lives. Even more were trafficked to get there. There's also the issue, like some of the legitimate business issues. Budweiser is the largest global sponsor of the World Cup, and Qatar had a guaranteed FIFA that wouldn't be a problem. 2 days before the World Cup, they banned all beer sales in the country and at the stadiums. And that might seem like really inconsequential. It's certainly not to Budweiser. And it's certainly not to now the illegal stuff that is being smuggled in and some of the behavior of fans. And the World Cup's a problem anyway. Like, we can talk about the World Cup and the Olympics as massive global sporting events that are problems anyway for a whole host of reasons. So it's not like this is the first time I've had to figure out what the hell I was going to do. But like, China and the Olympics was a rough one for me too.
That was brutal.
But the decision I have come to make is that I will watch the games that bring me joy. I support quite a lot of countries. I'm super into Wales beating England this year. Wales, the very first time they were in the tournament in 64 years. Love that for them. And then for every game I watch, I'm making a donation to Amnesty International, the Trevor Project, Rainbow Railroad. I have a laundry list of organizations that work with my International Rescue Committee, works with migrants and queer folks, to make sure that they are, that I'm doing something to counterbalance. It's not perfect. I still feel weird about it, but me not watching also doesn't do anything. So I'm hoping by watching and donating, I am doing something. And I'm certainly being every time someone asks me how the World Cup is going and if I'm having fun watching the football, I make sure to bring up the people who lost their lives. And I'm sure I'm making some people uncomfortable, and good, because this World Cup should make us desperately uncomfortable.
Very, very uncomfortable. Yeah. Speaking of things that also make us uncomfortable, our next segment is a phrase that we use, I think, pretty much every time we go live, maybe every time we record ourselves ever. And that is institutions always protect themselves.
Me, that's a deal, right? Ride with me if you ride with me. You can slide with me if you feel like 550 on the 5 sticky. Come get high with me. That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? That's a
And so we only have one entry in this segment this week.
I'm going to do a late breaking, and I actually have two.
Oh, you have a late breaking. Okay, cool. Well, I'll run through ICWA, and then a late breaking. Exciting, guys. It's almost like we run a news show here, where we talk about issues. It's exciting stuff. But I wanted to make sure that we do our part to talk about the current case that was heard 2 weeks ago by the United States Supreme Court. And I'm scrolling until I find the name of the case. Brackeen v. I knew it. Not helpful. This article. Scrolling. Anyway, there is a case before the United States Supreme Court. Holland v. Brackeen. That is to decide whether the Indian Child Welfare Act is constitutional. If you don't know what the Indian Child Welfare Act, it is an act that was passed in 1978 to address the concerns that Native children were being separated from their families and too frequently placed in non-Native homes. It was kind of an ongoing attempt to address what I mentioned at the start of Cancel Culture Watch today, which was the propensity of white folks to steal Native kids from their families and communities and homes and place them with white folks. We did that for a long time under the guise of assimilating, quote unquote, Native American children, erasing Native American identity and culture and relationships. In what is considered legally and just emotionally cultural genocide. So ICWA was a big deal in terms of guaranteeing support for Native families and communities, and stating that a Native child, if it is determined that they should be placed in care outside of their immediate parents, they should work to find a family member first, and if not, a relation within a tribe or nation that they are related to. And as we talk about this a lot, and I don't have 8 hours to describe Indigenous relationships, but the idea of relations in a lot of Indigenous communities is more extensive than we would understand it in white settler colonialist society. And it's not just extended family, and it is considered much, much more important for an Indigenous child to remain within an Indigenous community because of that understanding of relationship and community. So ICWA is under threat because some white folks who adopted Native kids are suing because they feel they are being discriminated against for their whiteness, which is just hilarious. And this case has gotten all the way to the United States Supreme Court. We won't know until June or July how they fall on it, but this report from Indian Country Today does seem to indicate that most of them favor keeping the Indian Child Welfare Act. It is worth also saying out loud that the law firm that is supporting the couple that has sued is doing this pro bono, and all of their other clients are oil and gas and fracking companies. So this has much larger ramifications for Native sovereignty in the United States and their ability to say what does and doesn't happen on their land and what does and doesn't happen to their bodies. So keep a weather eye on it. Institutions always protect themselves. And I'm hoping that is not the case on this one. My friend, what is your late breaking news?
Well, here's the deal. It's not late breaking to the planet, but it's late. What is exciting is that in the last several days, there have been multiple op-eds in large Baptist newspapers calling out Baylor, for not talking about Brittany Griner. So there's one. Here's another one that just came out. Baylor, how long will you ignore Brittany Griner's plight? This is by Mark Wingfield on November 16th. Then yesterday, a Baylor professor wrote in Baptist News Global about how we don't talk about Brittany, and that's wrong. For anyone who doesn't know, Brittany Griner is currently illegally, in our opinion, detained at a Russian penal colony for the Russian government claims that she had too much marijuana upon her person. Brittany is known to vape pot, but she was there for work, and she's not dumb. And there's a lot of questions as to whether or not it was planted. She is a Black lesbian. Those are two things that the Russian government hates: people of color and people in same-sex relationships. And she is physically imposing. She has a wingspan that is taller than I am. She is a great, if you want to make an example of somebody, she's a great one to pick, because Brittany is always herself. She was a student while I was working on my graduate degree. And Baylor built a huge amount of the women's basketball program in the late aughts on the back of Brittany Griner. And Baylor University, which calls ourselves Baylor Family after rebranding over Baylor Nation, which we had to do when we employed a football coach who let sex offenders onto our football field. We changed from Nation to Family. And are not living up to family values whatsoever. We are not, no one has spoken. Officially, Baylor has not offered any support, even empty words, much less any words at all. So
no T's and P's.
Zero T's and P's.
Wow. I mean, you know, and we'll get to some T and P moments later when we talk about the shooting in Colorado. But I mean, people like Lauren Boebert offered T's and P's. And she hates guns and queer people, or she loves guns and hates queer people. So, like, you know how bad Baylor is if you don't even get T's and P's out of them.
In the first couple of weeks after she was arrested, the family asked people not to say anything because they were trying, like, not to make public statements, because that's what the State Department asked them to do. In the last several weeks, her family and the State Department have said, no, everyone talk about this. Put public pressure on it. Get as big as you can, because the more public pressure there is, the easier it is for us to do a prisoner exchange. So, like, go nuts. Like, go nuts here. And Baylor University, the largest private religious institution on the planet, the largest Baptist university in the world, and her alma mater, has chosen to remain silent. We here at Abbey Research, I as a two-time Baylor alumni, and Aaron as a person who believes in justice, we stand for, I personally as an alumni call out Baylor at every opportunity that I can. Yes. And I am really grateful that some very politically powerful people are starting to make news in Baptist News Global, which is a huge deal in Baptist world. Especially because there are quite a lot of Christians and Baylor members, Baylor alumni, who believe that she got what she deserved for the heinous crime of carrying a little bit of pot in her suitcase. And now she's in a penal colony for 11 years. So, or 14 years, I can't remember, but far too long, because she shouldn't be there at all.
Shouldn't be there at all.
She shouldn't be there at all. So the institution will always protect itself. Baylor is an institution that will always protect itself. Even when law firms like Pepper Hamilton tell it how to act better, it frequently chooses not to. So that is my rant. For institutions will always protect themselves. What's our next category, dear?
The next segment up is not a joyful transition. I did try when I organized these segments, y'all, to kind of mix them up so we weren't just like doom, happy. But you guys know us, we have a little more doom than we do happy in terms of content. So next up is one of my personal favorite titles and memes of all time. Not all men, but definitely this fucking guy. To you, my friend. You found this entry.
This is going to be quick. This is just another kind of example of how Hollywood is hot garbage. So this guy, Eric Weinberg, who's been around for a while, where's his photo? There we go. Thank you, Hollywood Reporter. He was fired from Scrubs. Bill Lawrence fired him from Scrubs for being a perv. His nickname was Wine Perv. He was dismissed for inappropriate behavior on multiple occasions from multiple properties and kept working.
Super.
So this is a great article from Hollywood Reporter. He was remanded into custody. He's been accused of rape and sexual assault in 2 civil suits. He is I don't know, as my brother would say, he's a walking bag of dicks. But he was definitely empowered by a system that privileges white male potential over the safety of other people for a very long time because he was a funny comedy writer. So that concludes this segment of Not All Men, but definitely this fucking guy.
Definitely that fucking guy. Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. He wasn't even that funny. And yet it was still prioritized. Well, I just realized that I hadn't added the clip for the next segment. So while you were talking, I was doing that and I found it. Good news. It's processing currently. But next up is one of our favorite segments because we really do believe that representation matters and it makes a difference and it's important. And so this will, I think, be a forever segment for us. We will always have entries for representation.
I knock it down like boom, 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 boom. I knock it down like boom, 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 boom.
Literally any opportunity I have to use that quote from Lizzo, I will do so. Yes. So up in our first one is hi. We had an election a couple weeks ago, in case you guys didn't know.
Yeah.
And some real significant things happened in it. So, Kristen, you want to run through some of these hot topics, hot items?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of them. There was the very first Black woman elected to Congress from the state of Pennsylvania. There was Maura Healey and Tina Kotek will become the first out lesbian governors of Massachusetts and Oregon, respectively. Sarah Huckabee Sanders will be the first female governor of Arkansas. Wes Moore will be the first Black governor of the state of Maryland, my birth state. It's great. Like, I love representation, even when it's with people I don't like Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I am glad that there is now a woman in to show other women that this is possible, whether I agree with them or not. And so there's lots of people of color, lots of queer folks, lots of firsts. We also got, even though Aaron and I disagree, that there's already that actually Madison Cawthorn was the first member of Gen Z in the House of Representatives. The rest of the news media now agrees that there is 2 people, the first people in the House of Representatives. And that it's just like, look at all this. Like, look at all these firsts, guys.
I think it's really exciting. It's a lot of diverse representation, which is why we wanted to
the first Native American senator in almost 100 years, Mark Wayne Mullen.
It's just really exciting. Out lesbian governors, Black woman attorney general of Massachusetts, first Black representative, Black Republican elected to Congress from Michigan, first Indian American elected Congress from Michigan, Shri Tanadar. Like, just scroll through the list, learn about these folks.
I just always want the people who represent us to look like us.
Yeah, and I think that's what was so exciting about this midterm election was, you know, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, what matters is they look more like what America actually looks like.
Yep. There are more voices at the table, and that's what we always want.
It's always different looking, sounding voices as well. So super exciting. And included among that was Karen Bass, who was the first woman mayor elected to lead Los Angeles.
Second Black good luck mayor. And God bless to her. That seems like a task.
Yeah. Second Black mayor ever. So she is the first woman and second Black Angelino in the city's 240-year history. So good luck to you, Karen. It's a tall order, but that was one of the big ones that made it on the Representation Matters. And then it wouldn't be a Representation Matters segment without me talking about Native Americans. We are nothing if not on brand, folks. But speaking of the election, there weren't just Native Americans elected or re-elected. Sharice Davids was re-elected in Kansas. Like, there were several Native American representatives who were also re-elected. But I came across this article from Arizona Central talking about kind of the Native American road to the ballot and how it's still very difficult for Native people and Indigenous people to vote. They didn't get the full voting rights until 1968, y'all. 1968. So you can miss me with like, we have to go back, make America great again. When was it great? You can miss me. But it's a really good story about how the Indian Citizenship Act helped pave the way for this, and how activists have been working for a really long time to get voting rights for Native Americans. And so if you're interested in learning about it and reading about all of this activism, I encourage you to read this article because it's pretty cool. And we're excited to see Native American representation extend beyond the ballot box to actual factual humans in positions of power across the country. So let's go.
And now we take a quick break for me to switch screens because Chrome was like, you have too many tabs open in one.
Chrome was like, how can you possibly have this many?
Chrome was like, you need to calm down. But speaking of Taylor, our next segment is, this is why we can't have nice things.
And you would think that I would have used the song, This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, but I don't want to get a copyright strike. So I just found a GIF of Taylor and a royalty-free song.
Yeah. And let us know if you guys don't like the music or the music's too loud, or if you'd rather just have the GIFs. Like, we're having fun with them, but let us know how you're vibing.
Give us thumbs up, thumbs down, what works, what doesn't.
Yeah.
Hit us up.
Are they too long? Are they too short? You know, what would you like? So this is why we can't have nice things. There's if you are into beauty YouTube a little bit like I am, you will know the name Nikita Dragun. And if you don't, I'd like to introduce you to Nikita Dragun. She is a transgender beauty influencer who is, I mean, just a human ball of drama. Like, she's just a human ball of drama. And a couple weeks ago, she got arrested in Miami for being a human ball of drama. She absolutely deserved to get arrested. She should have been arrested. Here's where the problem comes in. Again, Nikita is trans, has been trans for many years, and was put into a male prison because the prison would not acknowledge her gender. She's been, since being released from prison, she has talked about the incredible, horrific experience of that. This happens a lot. She is legally female is the other thing. Like, that's what really got me here. Like, it's hard enough for trans folks who have legally transitioned, much less the people who don't have the money to legally transition and are still in this boat. She's been legally female, I think, for like 5 years. Like, all her paperwork is female, all of it. And she was still put in a male prison, a male jail, excuse me, in the men's unit, which I just find absolutely infuriating.
It's abhorrent, yeah.
And like, again, she's a ball of drama, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't deserve to be treated like a human. And she was not. She was not in this case. Thankfully, she was safe. That is not the case, and she has been saying this on all her YouTubes and her TikToks. She is grateful she was safe. That is not the case for many other transgender people put in this circumstance. Much more dangerous for transgender women to be put into a male facility than the opposite way. But there is still violence and assault reported when it is a transgender woman put in with women. So it's just unfortunate that the transgender women get attacked a whole lot more physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually and ecumenically. But we put people where they want to go. That's what we do. In the next category, in more good news, this one comes to me actually from a couple of my friends who live in Africa, who have various countries, Malawi, Nigeria, and Uganda, all told me these stories, that they have friends that have gone into sex work to pay for food for their children, increasingly since COVID. So I did some digging to see if it was anecdotal, to see if anyone was covering this. And thankfully, Goats and Soda blog at NPR, which is the best international like news, but not headline coverage, if that makes sense. Like they do the best, like this is what's going on the ground. Most of the time, if my friends in various African countries send me articles in English, they're sending me ones from Goats and Soda. So really good. HIV is a massive, massive risk. Sex workers are not legally protected really anywhere on the planet, except for Amsterdam. Even there, they're not that protected, but they're definitely not in sub-Saharan Africa at all. So making condoms mandatory, getting tested themselves, any of these things are not part of necessarily their lives. So the HIV, which was simmering at we're like still at epidemic levels, but like simmering, we're starting to see spikes again. And people who get it from sex work, there's so much more stigma and they're afraid to go get treatment. A lot of the treatment in some of these cities are controlled by churches, or even the government is a very religiously mandated thing. Not in all countries, but in some countries. So there's a whole host of shame that goes along with this. Getting access to some of these drugs, you need to be a certain moral persuasion. This is especially the case in Uganda, where same-sex relationships are, if not in the area, like on the books illegal, they're certainly like culturally illegal, and people face great danger. And sex work, women turning to sex work, it's usually heterosexual, but young boys turning to sex work to pay for food for their families, it will not be heterosexual. So there's a lot of mess here. This is a consequence of the climate crisis and also the war in Ukraine. For instance, inflation in Malawi is up to about 80% right now because of the war in Ukraine and the lack of grain coming from Ukraine, which is where a lot of the grain exports were coming from for countries in Africa. So this is a major problem that doesn't directly impact anybody really in the West, and so therefore we're not talking about it. But this is another reason why we can't have nice things.
It is. And lest we move from one sad section to another sad section, at least this one is where we try and hold people a little bit accountable, or tell stories of what accountability looks like, lest we all forget. Let's go to Accountability Corner.
All right. So this is a kind of a thumbs up for Cornell University, which is not something that I normally say. But
I know, I'm like,
I was pleased that this was at the beginning, the first week of November, there were reports that students were drugged and sexually assaulted. One student was sexually assaulted. Multiple students were drugged, allegedly at a residence off campus that belonged to several fraternities. And Cornell's response was to suspend the fraternities, which I thought was incredibly important. Like, that's the right thing to do. There's a lot of hemming and hawing about like how to deal with stuff on campus about security and whatever else. Regardless of the law in this, it's clear that the fraternities were creating an environment on campus, and not on campus, but like a campus environment. It was off campus, but a campus environment where students were not safe. And Cornell was right to say, we've revoked your charter. You cannot function here. And so this was a great move by Cornell, and we're glad they did it.
Amen.
Also, very glad that the Attorney General of Washington, D.C. has filed suit against Dan Snyder, the Washington Commanders, Roger Goodell, and the National Football League.
This is massive.
This makes me giddy on a level that might make no sense to people, because they're like, you don't care about the Commanders. No, I hate Dan Snyder. I hate Dan Snyder a lot, and I've never met him, but I hate him. The Attorney General for Washington, D.C. has filed a civil lawsuit against the Washington Commanders, team owner Daniel Snyder, the NFL, and Commissioner Roger Goodell for allegedly colluding to deceive fans and district residents about the league's investigation into the team's toxic workplace culture, allegation of sexual assault, in an effort to maintain a strong fan base and increase profits.
Yes.
The AG said his office was suing because you can't lie to DC residents in order to protect your image and profits and get away with it no matter who you are.
Yes.
So it is the worst kept secret at the NFL that place is an absolute dumpster fire of a place to work. On field personnel also say that, as well as front office people. So I hope at the same time, right after this happened, or right around the same time this happened, Dan Snyder floated the sale of the Washington Commanders, and may it be so.
From your lips to God's ears.
Sure, Deadline. I just accept
all the things, Deadline. This next one is also exciting news. It's moving the needle a little bit, not a whole lot. It could be moved more, but it's still exciting news that the House had passed a bill limiting sexual harassment NDAs. And this is specifically limiting employers' use of non-disclosure agreements to keep victims of sexual harassment silent. Overwhelmingly passed the House a few Wednesdays ago, and now it's going to head to Papa Joe's desk for signing. This is the next step from a law that Biden signed earlier this year that ended forced arbitration in such cases. So again, moving the needle. It only applies to instances before a dispute arises, not afterwards, and does not cover other workplace misconduct like age and race discrimination. It would also not apply to NDAs signed as a part of settlements of sexual harassment lawsuits, but it instead covers the kind of forced NDAs that employees face as conditions of employment. It's worth pointing out, I think, all of the ways in which this bill does not cover things, but what it doesn't cover, so that we can continue to advocate for the changes that we would like to see in the ways that institutions always protect themselves and protect themselves with these non-disclosure agreements. But bully on the White House and the Houses of Representatives for representing people, actually, and voting to overwhelmingly restrict institutions' abilities to silence people who are victims of sexual harassment. So, hey, Accountability Corner was actually pretty positive this time around.
It really was. We got 3 stories left, guys. We're coming in for a landing, and the next one is okay. Sure, like. We've struggled with what to name this category, but the vibe is like, sure, humans. Okay.
Humans. I forgot it was Tenet in that one. We had a vote. We had a team vote which meme I was going to use. We're real happy we used Tenet with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the world is very strange, and it's getting stranger by the day. Thank you, David. And this comes to us from the beginning of the month, in which the Norwegian princess Martha Louise is quitting her royal duties to work alongside a spiritual guru. Again, I should put that should be in quotes, Guardian, because he calls himself a spiritual guru. That is an actual thing that I'm not sure this man is.
Well, he does. They do say self-proclaimed shaman, and they put shaman in quotes. So, like, I'll give them that.
They do later, yeah. So she is in a relationship with Durek Verrett, a Hollywood spiritual guru.
Sure.
He is most famously known for suggesting that cancer was a choice.
Oh, I've always wondered if that was the case and people were just unnecessarily going through subjecting poison into their body for funsies.
Yeah, just choosing cancer. I know so many people who've just chosen cancer.
Chosen cancer.
He also sells a medallion on his website called Spirit Optimizer, which
Nope.
he claims helped him overcome COVID-19.
Nope. Not a thing. That's not a thing. Nope.
It's humans, man. A poll in September found 17% of Norwegians now have a lower opinion of the generally popular royal family, nearly all citing the princess and the shaman as the reason. So, great job, Princess Marta. You seem to be under the spell that this man has cast on you, and it's hurting yourself and your family and your country. But humans, man. I saw this and I said, this is something
Humans.
we have to talk about. That's it, really. That's all I really wanted to say about that.
All right. Well, we actually do have a piece of good news.
We do have good news, and I saved them for the end because usually by this mark, a lot of people are like, "God, you guys are depressing." But we actually have some good hockey news, which is just I thought those were oxymoronic statements, but apparently not.
You make me win in every way. You showed me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the
So
Okay, the link isn't showing for some reason. Yahoo says no. So let me
hit refresh.
see what's going on. I hit refresh several times.
Oh, bless. Too many tabs open. Chrome was like, what have you done?
There we go. I got it.
You're all good. Our good hockey news comes from former NHL two-time Stanley Cup champion Daniel Carcillo, who has put his name at the front of a lawsuit against the Canadian Hockey League, which is a larger claim alleging widespread and ritualized hazing, racism, homophobia, sexual and physical abuse in the Canadian major junior hockey leagues, including the OHL, Ontario Hockey League, the WHL, and the QMJHL, Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. For those of you that don't know, the Canadian hockey leagues are the primary feeders into the National Hockey League in terms of where players go to kind of hone their skills before they get drafted or even after they get drafted. But this is in good vibes only because Daniel joined this lawsuit because he wanted to put a name on it and he wanted to change. So he said, this is a quote from DC, "I think it's important to ensure that there's an avenue for victims to be able to come forward and share their stories and to create a safer environment moving forward for minors to come up in a positive culture and hopefully to not have to experience what has traditionally gone on for several decades." And no statements I can see he is claiming himself a victim of any of these things. He may or may not be, but he's just decided, you know what? It's awesome and we're going to do it because it's the right thing to do. And younger people, whether they be hockey players or not, shouldn't have to grow up in a toxic hockey culture. And I flippin' loved it. And that's why it's in good vibes only.
What she said. I mean, I love somebody who uses their voice for power and for possible change when it possibly costs them a lot or nothing, either way. So really appreciate this. I've never heard of this young man, but he gets my vote for good human.
He does get the vote for good human. Our final segment in Cancel Culture Watch is always going to be Make It Make Sense. Usually because we're going to have a lot more to say on it. But this one, I don't think we're going to have a lot to say on it. But we're going to ask us all to make it make sense anyway. This news dropped this weekend, Sunday morning. We learned of a mass shooting at Club Q, which is a gay club, a drag club in my hometown of Colorado Springs, Colorado, where a gunman showed up towards midnight Saturday night, opened fire, and in 5 minutes was able to kill 5 and injure 19 people. He was stopped by an unarmed combat veteran who was there with his wife and daughter, and daughter's boyfriend and friends. His wife and daughter were both shot, but he took down the gunman. And then, in one of my most favorite stories out of this horrible, horrible thing, a drag queen stepped on him with her high heels and helped subdue him that way. So I would like to point to this evidence anytime somebody says a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. You know what stops people with guns? People who are tired of being shot places.
I was going to say
And
drag
drag
queen
queen.
with stilettos. Could we give every elementary school teacher a pair of stilettos? I'm significantly more okay with that than giving them guns.
Than giving them gun training and bulletproof vests.
I mean, because I could have used stiletto training, honestly. Like,
I mean, we all could. We all could. You know, we've talked about mass shootings a lot on this channel. I'm not going to over talk about them. It was a very hard weekend for me to see this happen in my hometown. Not at all surprised that it happened anywhere in America, at least of all my hometown, which is a very, can be in some parts, a very conservative electorate and
it's
body
the home.
politic.
It's the home base for Focus on the Family.
Is over 500 Christian organizations are based or have headquarters or have offices in Colorado Springs. There are
Evangelical organizations in particular.
evangelical. There are 4 large-scale military bases as well in the immediate Colorado Springs area. So, but you know, I kind of wanted to put this in here to say it's bullshit, and we're real just devastated and infuriated to see another safe space stolen from queer folks because of hatred and lack of empathy and lack of treating humans like humans. But I also wanted to say that, you know, I have no idea what it's like to be a queer person in my hometown, as I am not and was not growing up there. I can imagine it's very, very hard, but I also do know there's a lot of wonderful humans in my hometown. And so it's real easy to demonize Colorado Springs and to say that it is one thing when it is many things, as all places are. That's not to say some horrible things have been done, particularly in that part of the city where the club was, in terms of, you know, the way that the school systems have changed and what's been taught in schools and, you know, uniforms and all this kind of stuff. So it's seeped into the body politic a lot, but particularly we just wanted to take a minute to hold space for the 5 humans who were killed on Trans Day of Remembrance, 2 of them being openly trans people themselves who had found community and acceptance and love in what sounds like was a damn delightful place. One of the victims was a bartender who not only created a safe space for queer folks, but like gave away his own paycheck to people during the pandemic who lost their jobs, and was just, by all accounts, a wonderful human person. And I did see, I want to shout out Colorado Springs Police Department for actively saying every time they stepped up to the podium that this was an act of hate against our community and that it does not stand. And when they read out the names of the victims who died, the police chief said into the microphone, you know, these human persons died, and we are going to call them what they wanted to be called and what their family and who they saw themselves as, whether or not they had legally transitioned or not. And so, you know, we try and find some hope out of this thing, but it made sense to go and make it make sense, because as Kristen and I say to each other literally every time there's a mass shooting, which is every other day in America, never mind the horrific levels of gun violence in other parts of the country, including where Kristen is sitting right now. There's been a couple news articles that have actually been written about gun violence in Kensington, which shocked me to my bones. It doesn't have to be this way.
It doesn't. We, and by we, I mean society as a whole, are making a whole lot of choices to keep it this way. And that's one of the complicated things about living in community, is that there's a lot of conflicting values, a lot. But we do want to end this cancel culture watch with a couple things. First, we want to acknowledge on this week that we are all sitting on stolen land. And we know a lot of Native folks have very, very mixed emotions about white folks doing land acknowledgements. But we want to encourage all of you to see whose land you're sitting on. At least start there and introduce their tribal names into your Thanksgiving conversation. For my family, that will be the Lenni Lenape lands. Pretty much my entire family lives on them because they were huge.
They're everywhere.
They were everywhere.
Yes.
And I will make sure that their names are said at the table on Thursday.
Where I currently live is Osage land, where I was born and raised, is Cheyenne, Ute, and Arapaho land out in Colorado. And, we talk about Native American stuff as much as we can, Indigenous stuff as much as we can for two white ladies. But this week is particular. We'll have some social media coming out. Native American Heritage Day is officially Black Friday, which is hilarious. But we're going to talk about it anyway. And we want to say out loud that we recognize that the myth of Thanksgiving as it is celebrated in the United States is very traumatic and stereotypical and exclusionary of our Indigenous neighbors. And we do our best to take the thanks part and the family part of Thanksgiving and leave the rest of it out and acknowledge the trauma and pain that this day represents for a lot of humans in this planet and on this land that is not ours.
We also want to acknowledge that this is an incredibly important day for a lot of families that mark seeing each other, especially after many years apart. And we want to acknowledge that it's traumatic, even if you're not Native, if you don't get along with your family. So Thursday is a whole bag of things. And whatever it is to you, our hope is that if you cannot be with people with whom you are safe, you carry pocket friends with you with whom you are safe, and you can communicate with them however you are. Wherever you are in the world, wherever you are watching this, we are thankful for you. And we are deeply grateful that you are part of why we can do this work, and why we can spend our lives doing the things that we love. And so we are very, very grateful for that. May you move forward in acknowledgement of who you are and whose you are. May you be seen, heard, understood, and know that you are loved. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.